85% of the last mile vehicle owners are individual vehicle owners. These people didn't used to have a lot of utilization. Like उनकी गाड़ी, they used to get probably like one order a day. No, एक order a day में आपकी कमाई ज़्यादा हो नहीं पाती. This is where kind of like the porter idea was born. Often जब लोग बोलते हैं ना कि पोर्ट करना क्यों ज़रूरी है, the reason why it's important is that you stay very close to how the engineering landscape is evolving. क्या easy है, क्या मुश्किल है, where could developers be struggling, what's the next big thing.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode. So today I am here with Shruti Ranjan, who is Chief Product and Technology Officer at PORTER. So PORTER is India's largest marketplace for intra-city transportation and logistics. They help drivers, businesses and individuals in making their life easier. And they use technology really well in doing this. And that is what fascinates me more. So this is what I'm going to discuss with Shruti. So hi Shruti, how are you?
Nice to meet you, Sandeep, and a lot of respect for what Geeks for Geeks is doing for the Indian education system.
Alright, great. So Shruti, tell us more about your journey from the college days to reaching the point where you are right now.
So I'll kind of like go in a little bit of chronology. So I'm based out of Bhubaneswar, Odisha, but a lot of my schooling happened in Hyderabad. Dad was in the banking sector. And then thankfully he made sure that I had a very stable education all the way from UKG till 12th. And Hyderabad is a great education hub. People are really serious about their education there. And that kind of like gave a lot of rigor in my education in some form. I remember, this is a little kind of like funny, 9th, 10th mein hum log, we used to do something called as IIT Foundation coaching. So normally log 11वीं 12वीं में IIT coaching करते हैं, and in Hyderabad that whole thing starts all the way from 8th, and in fact like India में भी काफ़ी जगह फैल गया है ये. And I remember going to school in the morning, evening को coaching जाते थे. Then the whole thing continued in 11th and 12th as well. So the whole kind of like schooling period in Hyderabad was kind of like that kind of a rigor, and in a way like I credit a lot of kind of like knowledge, rigor and the fundamentals becoming stronger in that period, because you're just kind of like forced into that environment. So that was the whole Hyderabad episode. And I gave JEE and got into IIT Kanpur. Did my bachelor's and master's in computer science there. College was a different kind of like era in my life. 12वीं तक like it was kind of like a very shielded environment where my parents were making sure that I was getting the right education, no distractions and other things. And then came in college where you get you come out of that safe environment, and I think that's important in everybody's lives. And that was the period when I also got to interact with and the exposure to like a broader set of people from all over India, and bunch of people from all parts of India came in, and great set of smart people as well. Usually in good colleges you have good people coming in, so the exposure was great. And college में ये भी होता है कि you get a more rounded kind of like exposure. तुम सिर्फ पढ़ाई नहीं देखते हो. You do understand kind of like the importance of building the right friendships, loyalty क्यों ज़रूरी है. थोड़े बहुत vices भी ज़रूरी हो जाती हैं, and I think like vices allow you to know कि what's wrong and what's right. And in general kind of like the broader sense of exposure to the right education, to the right infrastructure, and even outside college as well, and in terms of what kind of internships are you doing, like, and I had a very research oriented mindset back in college, so I did a bunch of research stints. I was at Microsoft Research a few times, so that kind of exposure also helps, so that you get to know like what people are really doing, what's kind of like a good benchmark to aspire to. So those things happened in college, and I would say that a lot of my exposure years really started in college, while the knowledge fundamentals started before then. Post college, I got into the industry, and there's a little bit of backstory here. Like I was really set on doing higher education. As I said, मेरा काफ़ी research oriented mindset था. Did a few research internships. Thesis, I did my master's in natural language processing, by the way. So I was very into natural language processing and machine learning. तो मेरा thesis उसमें था.
That too at that time, right? When not many people were talking about this.
That's true. At that time when it was relatively nascent, अब तो काफ़ी common हो गया है. And I was kind of like excited by the whole space. And मेरा मन था कि चलो higher education करना है. I'll try to get into academia. Interestingly, in the campus placement, college placement season, I got an opportunity to work in the AI team of an ad tech company called Rocket Fuel. And it was a relatively rarer opportunity. Usually, like, अगर आप AI sector में देखोगे तो people look for little more expertise and kind of like education to absorb you in. And when I got that opportunity a little early on, I thought, okay, I should explore the industry side of things. Like, अभी काफ़ी theory देखा है, like how are really people putting into practice. So I jumped at that opportunity. I thought, okay, let me explore that. I put my academic plans on hold. Never looked back on them. And I think that the whole industry kind of like bug really bit me then. So I got into the ad tech space. Was in Rocket Fuel for a couple of years.
And this happened just after BTech or during your third year or internship? Or?
No, this happened after my education. So like I graduated out of college, I did my thesis, and then I got into Rocket Fuel.
Rocket Fuel must have been a startup.
It was around 5 years old,
5 years.
But it was pretty fast growing. So तब actually like decently बड़ी हो गई थी. It had IPO'd just before I joined. I remember the engineering team itself being like around about 100 people strong already. So it was a good kind of like a mid-scale company, आप बोल सकते हो. And I was, and it was located in California. So I was there for a few years then. And did that, worked a lot on, like fraud detection. Like usually, okay, so Rocket Fuel is an ad tech company, right? So वहाँ पे ad fraud is a very prevalent problem. So a lot of my work went into how to figure out कि fraudulent ad inventory को identify कैसे करो and how do you weed it out. So that very actively for a few years. And around mid of 2015, I made a personal call to come back to India. Couple of reasons, like fundamentally, I think like I miss my family and network in India. Like it was kind of like a home calling in some form, and then I felt that I would want to go back. And 2015 was also a very interesting time for the Indian startup ecosystem, as you might remember. There were a lot of startups, a lot of VC money being flowed in, and a lot of ideas being propagated around. So I think like it was kind of like a hallmark set of years for the Indian ecosystem, and I thought this is a good time to probably like capitalize on this. So I came back and got in touch with a few companies, PORTER being one of them. And I knew a couple of the founding team members back from my college days, so we got talking. Couple of things which really appealed to me about PORTER. The fundamental space it operates in. Like I still strongly believe that logistics and supply chain is a perennial evergreen problem statement. It serves as the backbone for a lot of things in the country. And especially in India, this still holds a lot of promise in terms of what we can deliver. And that stuck with me. And I think like at that young age, you have better people instincts than probably like business instincts. And I really liked the founding team. I think fundamentally it's a set of people who are grounded, pragmatic, and the value system kind of like echoed with me a lot. And that's what made me join PORTER. And it's been a very long time now, so you can call me a two-company man in some form. And I'm completing around about 9 years in PORTER now. Joined PORTER really early on, back when it was around 7-8 months old. I remember being the 7th engineer, the 6th engineer. We were operating in one city. We were doing probably like 50 to 100 orders a day, एक category. So it's been a big transformation. You obviously like go through your fair share of ups and downs in this entire journey. And then fortunately got to see Porter in its 0 to 1 early formative years. Now seeing Porter in kind of like a post PMF growth stage era where we are scaling, and it's kind of like multiple businesses, multiple categories, multiple cities, big team sizes, and kind of like navigating through that journey right now. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, like what has happened so far.
All right, Shruti, so please tell us more about Porter, the story, the 10 years here, and the mission and all those things about the company. Everybody would like to hear about that.
Okay, like I'll go into some of the backstory behind how Porter got started. The founders like Pranav, Uttam, Vikas, a bunch of entrepreneurial folks. In fact, like 2 of them come from business families. And Pranav and Uttam were kind of like the early proponents of the Porter idea, and were very heavily inspired by the whole Uber for X model. It was a great abstract idea about how aggregation can bring a lot of value in a fragmented environment. Any fragmented environment में जब आप aggregation लाते हो तो value create होता है obviously, and that's what Uber really did well. And in fact, like Uber inspired a lot of companies to follow that kind of model. The founders were based out of Bombay back then, and when they saw this kind of like an idea, they started off with Kali Pili, if you know the Kali Pili in Bombay, the taxis. And not many know this story, but it was kind of like initial test bed वहाँ से चालू हुआ था, and then people tried it off. Pranav and Uttam tried out here. They realized obviously that while value है, it's not a big market obviously, so they had to think bigger. And Bombay में they realized that there is also the passenger transport में also there are a lot of other players as well, right? So उस समय we already had the likes of Uber, Ola present and doing really well. And then they looked at sister categories, and then there was the whole goods movement space, which was like unsolved for. And the fundamental thesis which got borne out is that if you look at goods delivery in India, and I'm talking about the last mile goods delivery, there's a little bit of kind of like theory here. If you look at like logistics, right, it's broadly divided into 3 legs. We call it as first mile, middle mile, last mile. And first mile is often where you have kind of like a producer of supply goods, and which gets transported like from the producer to say a warehouse of some sorts. So that's what you call as the first mile. Then you have the middle mile, where you go from a warehouse to other hubs, and the last mile is from that hub it gets transported to, and the hub could also be, by the way, shops. It gets transported from, the last mile is all about that last hub or the last shop to an end consumer, or it could be another shop. So it's kind of like that last mile. And there was a lot of opportunity to be tapped into in the last mile segment. Because last mile segment mein, we observed that there was a lot of supply fragmentation. The classic use case is you are an SME, आप एक business चलाते हो. Now you could be a furniture shop owner and आपका furniture है. There is a customer who comes into the furniture shop, says कि I want to buy something, and रोज का धंधा होता है, and that furniture now needs to be sent. Now it needs to be sent to the customer. That's a typical most common use case. It could also be कि एक branch से दूसरे branch आपको भेजना पड़ रहा है, or something else. Now this is a very recurring daily need. And the problem here is for the customer, इस रोज के नीड के लिए आपके पास सप्लाई कितनी है. You don't run your own supply or fleet space because it's way too costly. आप बड़े नहीं हो. You're not a big enterprise, you can afford to run a big fleet of your own. So what they rely on is local transporter networks. Local transporter networks are usually like small scale fleet owners जिनके under there are probably like 5 to 10 vehicles जो एक area या एक zone में operate करते हैं, and they have tie-ups with these SMEs. The problem with this setup is it's very highly fragmented. So for the shopkeeper, whenever I want to get a vehicle, I will not necessarily get it on demand, क्योंकि वो 5-10 गाड़ियाँ या तो engaged होती हैं तो available नहीं होती. So on demand fulfillment never used to happen. It used to happen later. And if I were to look at the other side of the ecosystem, which is for the supply side, for the transporter network, the people who ply the vehicles, the driver owners, these people didn't used to have a lot of utilization. Like उनकी गाड़ी, they used to get probably like 1 order a day. Now, एक order a day में आपकी कमाई ज़्यादा हो नहीं पाती. Like you probably do like 10,000 per month kind of like earnings, which is not a great livelihood to make in this space. So typical problems of a very fragmented space, जहाँ पे enough aggregation नहीं हो रहा है, enough utilization नहीं हो रहा है. And this is where kind of like the Porter idea was born, that okay, how do we take this fragmented space and bring in more aggregation here? So at its core, Porter is a matchmaking platform which says that I'm going to aggregate demand and supply on both sides and help matchmake them, bringing in those benefits of higher utilization for the supply. So you go from an order a day to 2.5, 3 orders a day. Now that's big. Now you start seeing that your supply is able to earn 2 to 3x its normal earnings in the prior setup, while on the other side for the demand, you start getting more on-demand fulfillment, which is typically a need for these businesses क्योंकि उनको बहुत सामान भेजना पड़ता है at different times of the day. So that's how the whole Porter idea began, and we tapped into it. Very good product market fit. People love the whole idea proposition, and in fact, like that's one of the reasons why we have managed to stay strong over these years, while kind of like there has been turbulence in this sector, in this industry for some time.
There was COVID also, right?
There was COVID. COVID brought with it its own set of challenges, like the whole supply chain shut for many months. Thankfully, because it's a supply chain space now, because ये इतना important backbone है, the government had a big push to bring it back on track. Unlike say your entire travel sector, hospitality sector, they took a lot of time to recover. But the supply chain bounced back pretty fast, so that worked in our favor. But as I was saying, kind of like the reason why we kind of like stayed afloat for the 10 years is because of the fact that the product market fit was good. If I look at kind of like the early years and the mid years, how kind of Porter evolved, the first few years was really focused on, like how do we bring in more awareness, and then kind of like the subsequent years where that एक बार awareness आया, because the product market fit was good, solid, word spread around, organic growth started happening a lot, and we worked extensively on problems of supply building and so on and so forth, and financial prudence was a big necessity across all of these years, वो तो ज़रूरी होता ही है, but that's kind of like how Porter originated, the early years.
So tell me more about in layman terms, like if I'm a truck owner, right? I have say 5-6 trucks. So truck are the vehicles that you support mostly, right? And if there's a businessman, how do you connect them? Like how does Porter function? We provide some interface to the drivers or the vehicle owners, or we provide some interface to the end users as well, right?
Correct.
That's what we do.
Correct.
And I mean, so what kind of options I have on Porter if I want to basically onboard as a Porter, and if I'm a business, so what kind of options and services Porter has for me?
True. So like I'll talk about both sides, like how typically it works in Porter. If you're on the supply side, and by the way, like a quick fact about India, 85% of the last mile vehicle owners are individual vehicle owners. These are driver partners who have their own vehicle. So it's not that aggregated actually. Like fleet owners भी होते हैं तो बहुत छोटे scale में होते हैं. You're talking about maybe like a transporter having like 5 vehicles on average, but ये भी कम scale में होता है. You have a lot of driver partners who have their own vehicle. It's like a cab owner who has his or her own cab. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why it's so fragmented. for these people, the whole idea is that until now, classically, what did you used to do? You used to look for a local transporter network, attach yourself there, and then like hope that like you get enough orders. And with Porter, the process is as simple as coming to Porter. There's a simple onboarding portal. You have supply side application, so we call it as the driver partner app. आप driver partner app download करते हो. There's a digitized onboarding process. You submit a bunch of documents. We verify it. We do a KYC like it happens with other places, and then we onboard you. Suppose that you can actually literally, it's as simple as I come into the app, I declare that I'm willing to do orders. We call it as a simple login step. आप login करते हो, and then when you log in, we start broadcasting orders to you, and आप order service करो. And when you feel like you don't want to do orders in the day, you can just log off the system, and there you go. It's kind of like a good freelance system where people can come in, do orders whenever they wish to, and then get out of the system and make money in the process. And on the other side, if you look at the customer, which is your businesses, even retailers like you and me, for them the whole process is आपको सामान भेजना है. You download the Porter app. You do a very simple kind of like a login sign up step, post which you get a host of services. And in fact, like you will find a wide array of services on a platform like Porter. So it's not just trucks today. We go all the way from 2-wheelers to 3-wheelers to 4-wheelers. So that's kind of like the host of services which we offer. 2-wheelers allows you to move goods in the shipment range of 0 to 20 kilos. 3-wheelers आपका 150 to 600 kilo segment में operate करता है. Then you have your 4-wheeler segment, which is going 600 upwards, even going to the likes of 3000 kilos, 2000 kilos. So it's a very big spectrum which is there. And based on what your need is. Now it could be that, and in fact, businesses have varying needs. Like as a shopkeeper, you could be wanting to send, say, certain spare parts. तो फिर आपको 2-wheeler का requirement आ जाएगा. Or you could be wanting to send like a big batch of like furniture goods and other things, which is like 200-300 kilos. फिर आप truck book करोगे उसको book करने के लिए. So you have those kinds of options available to you. And it also caters to the retail segment. Retail segment like you and me. अगर हमको सामान भेजना होता है, usually a common requirement is house shifting. तो house shifting के लिए we have a very tailored specific product offering which allows you to declare कि आपको कितना सामान भेजना है, 1 BHK है, 2 BHK है, and then we help you in the whole process of packing the goods and like shipping it to the other place and then unloading the goods. And price you favorably. Like the whole aspect of this is it has to be transparent pricing, so you don't feel that it's very flaky and there is a lot of black boxness in the whole setup. So this is how it operates on both sides of the...
It looks like there is a lot of tech involved, and we are now going to talk about tech. When you joined Porter, you joined as a data scientist at that time. Is that right?
That's true.
So, and it feels great to see that a company is hiring data scientists during the time, right? When you graduated. And I mean, how has been the journey and how did you build the tech? How did the tech grew over the time? And I mean, everybody is talking about AI and data science these days. So, and I saw your articles also. You mentioned that you use it a lot. You were already using it a lot. So, tell us more about the journey and how you use AI ML in your products.
So, okay. So, I'll kind of like break the whole tech journey, right, into a couple of segments. If you look at the early years, जब हम शुरू किए थे, and I'm talking about back when I joined. Kind of like a 7-8 member engineering team. I joined as a data scientist, by the way, because then we realized that there are certain problems which are more data driven, and like the two kinds of problem space where data science helps. Like एक set of problems is what we call as data informed, where you have a bunch of people in the organization and stakeholders who want to make decisions based on data and you want to keep them informed. Data driven is where your product itself is actually data driven. So you're making real-time decisions on data. And we realized that there are certain products which need to be data driven fundamentally. And one of those problems was demand supply mismatch, which is that if you look at kind of a platform like Porter, you will inevitably find that there are times of the day or there are specific geographies where you are supply starved and demand excess. And उस situation में होता यही है कि your fulfillment drops. And what you try to do to avoid such situations is proactively anticipate कि ऐसे situations कहाँ आने वाले हैं and then shape your demand and supply accordingly. And when I say shape it, it means that where there is demand excess, you try to normalize the demand over different times of the day and the week. And on the supply side, it's the same idea again, that you try to normalize your supply, shore up your supply when the supply is going to be deficited. So that's kind of like some of those problems which we were tackling early on. So I worked in that space for a couple of years. What we did realize that is that in the early years when a company doesn't have enough scale, data-driven products start hitting a certain saturation. Like they cannot really shine, and when they truly shine is when you've started hitting more scale. So I would say that the whole data science space of Porter has shined more in the last few years than in the early years. Because at this point we are truly working with a very large set scale of orders. We are serving 7 lakh driver partners, around about 1.5 CR customers. Now these are big volumes to be operating in, and जब उस scale में आप काम करते हो, that's when these products start making sense to you. And in that kind of like mode, there are a few products which are truly data science led for us. One of the key segments is the whole matchmaking platform itself. When I say matchmaking platform, the idea is कि जब आपके पास एक booking आती है, how do you know who is the right driver partner for this? Because what you're trying to boost up is the likelihood of fulfillment of that order. Now, it can happen जब order आता है that the driver partners will reject the order and inevitably the order goes unfulfilled. So you're trying to find the best driver partner so that your fulfillment goes up. Now this is a very data-driven decision because it relies on a lot of signals. Now signals could be the fact that, okay, is this driver partner likely to fulfill this order because actually the destination of the order is closer to his or her home? Now that often becomes a signal for people. Is this order going to a driver partner who has generally a track record of accepting orders a lot? Who is a very diligent, disciplined partner, in which case again like the propensity to fulfill goes up. So these are kind of like some signals which we tend to capture. So the matchmaking platform is one of the primary data science powered engines, and there are of course like a bunch of other places as well. Typically like classic use cases come in the form of lead acquisition, churn prediction. Now, these are places where you again want to be very efficient. You want to make sure that you tap into the right customers before they churn out of your platform. And वो predict करने के लिए again you rely on a lot of data signals. So you have models powering that, and so on and so forth. So I hope kind of like the flavor gets in key how kind of like data science has over the years been adopted at Porter. If you look at generally the tech landscape itself, early on. The broad landscape was it was a small team. Focus was a lot on tech simplicity. You want to build fast. You want to make sure that engineers and dev teams are able to contribute really quickly, and you want to keep things simple with a high fungibility. But when you start hitting mid scales and large scales, which is where Porter is right now, so you're talking about engineering team which is numbering a few hundreds and so on and so forth. And in those cases, you need to solve problems of how to keep teams autonomous, how to keep things efficient. Now, efficient ke naam pe, you want to focus on standardization, you want to focus on maturity, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like where you put in a lot of your effort. And I'll probably talk later in today's discussion about how we are probably going about doing that. But usually it's typical 0 to 1 versus scaling wale jo challenges hote hain.
Alright, so when you joined, you were like 6-7 people team, and how was like hiring and not hiring, I'll cover hiring later, but the main thing I just want to understand is the audience that we have, they are mostly people who are tech people, they're in engineering colleges, they're like working professionals, so they want to understand where is the tech industry going, and a company like you that has a big tech team, they want to understand how many jobs are there for front-end development, back-end development, product managers, testers, designers, and all these people. So how is the team structured? Like what is the ratio? Like how many front-end developers, back-end developers? How much is the ratio for machine learning, data science teams? So that would help the audience understanding what are the job requirements in a company like you.
Fair enough. So if I look at the general composition, right, of the tech team, it's around about this ballpark. Like your backend workforce is the biggest. It usually accounts for 50 to 60% of your workforce. Then you have your front end workforce, and when I talk about the front end set of people, you're talking about app developers, you're talking about web developers, and in fact the language is becoming more enmeshed today. Like the kind of like core tech stack is amalgamating. So ऐसा नहीं कि app tech stack UI tech stack से बहुत ज़्यादा अलग हो रहा है, and in fact like a lot of people are building platforms so that both sets of development can be done by the same set of people. So हमारा पूरा जो UI workforce है that's probably around about 25-30 odd percent, so it's around like 60-25% of sorts. And then there is a good kind of like another 15% which is working on the testing side of things. So that's usually how it operates. So it's kind of like a 55, 25, 15, 20 kind of like split on back end, front end, and the testing.
And the product managers, that's again a very promising field these days.
Yes. So product अगर आप देखोगे usually the product set of the product team has a general ratio of a 4:1 or a 5:1. Like हर 4-5 devs में एक product manager होता है या होती है, so that you are able to like keep a close watch on how the product is being built. So अगर आपकी like if you have a 200 member dev team, something like that, then 50 odd product team is something how it generally translates.
Alright, Shruti, so you have seen the engineering journey from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10, and I very well understand when you are 0 to 1 journey, the working style of engineering team is different, and 1 to 10 it's different. So tell us more about it. I mean, how things changed in the engineering team during this journey.
And it's actually like very distinctful and worth bringing out the differences between these two steps. If you look at least Porter back in its 0 to 1 days, a lot of your attention is focused on rapid product building. तो उस सेंस में आप अपनी इंजीनियरिंग टीम्स थोड़ी छोटी रखते हो. You focus a lot more on tech stack simplicity. Like, as I said before, कि your tech stack can't be too complex for people to onboard on. And there has to be necessarily not a very rigid team structure. Fungibility ज़्यादा होना चाहिए so that people are able to work on different domains really fast and contribute to it. So what usually happens in this kind of a setup is that you naturally see products and features being built out really fast, often in an ad hoc setup. You don't necessarily rely on like good product roadmaps to build out things because you don't operate in that mode. You often operate on okay, what's the problem today and how do I solve it? So उस sense में a lot of rapid product iteration happens. A lot of fungibility also happens. Like I think early developers get a lot of exposure to different domains of the company very quickly. Like on day 1 or month 1, you're working on say the booking system of the company, and it can very well happen on month 3 you're working on something which is related to the supply, and on month 6 you're working on say a data problem statement and so on and so forth. So that kind of fungibility happens really well. You are also conscious to not keep too many control gates in your engineering setup. Control gates ज़्यादा रखते हो तो speed slow होने लग जाता है. And then what happens as a consequence of this whole thing also, and you have to be and you should be okay with it, is you accumulating tech debt as well, and then it happens. So you will see that tech debt accumulation is also like a little more rampant in the early days. When you go into more kind of like mid-scale stages, like let's say the 1 to 10 kind of like stages, and usually these are stages when you start seeing that you have multiple lines of businesses, you have a lot more teams, your developer team size and the engineering team size and the product team size has grown by easily like 5x. Now, those kinds of setups, you require a different model of operating. The model of operating there is that you want to service every line of business very well. तो आपकी fungibility थोड़ी कम रहती है. You want to nurture a two-wheeler business, you want to nurture a trucks business, you want to nurture, say, your data platform and so on and so forth. So you have dedicated teams around them. Your tech stack needs to be standardized, and this is often a very important piece because जब आप इतने सारे teams के across काम करते, अब आपकी एक engineering team नहीं है, you essentially working with multiple engineering teams. If your tech stack is not standardized, आप maturity को बहुत जल्दी evolve नहीं कर पाते. Imagine a setup where you have 10 teams, but all 10 teams are using 10 different tech stacks. It's going to be very difficult for you to mature all of them at the same space because engineering in itself and product in itself is a very knowledge heavy discipline. तो आप करने की क्या कोशिश करते हो कि is that you want to normalize your tech stack, make it more common across teams, and focus more on how to evolve the maturity of those tech stacks. It could be in terms of your databases, in terms of what language you're using, in terms of, say, what your infrastructure is. You start normalizing them. And accordingly, in this setup, you invest very heavily into good platforms as well, because platforms allow you to create a lot of leverage. Now, the leverage could come, say, from something like an engineering platform, which is obsessed about the fact, okay, how do I make my database become more and more efficient? So, उस हिसाब से they start evolving the stack, and then the team start adopting it. Or it could be in terms of, say, your something like a common product problem, payments मान लो या फिर pricing ले लो. These start becoming ubiquitous problem statements across different businesses, and उसको आप solve करने की कोशिश करते हो. So you start investing into these sorts of platform layers so that the maturity is being amped up really fast, and you're creating that leverage so that teams are bootstrapping really quickly. So these are some key differences which start happening in the early stages and later stages. One of the other key parts which you will start noticing in the later stages of the organization is you will see a lot of specialization happening. You will have teams and people becoming really like good experts and going deep into how databases work, how, say, infrastructure works, or how kind of like language stacks can be made ruthlessly optimized. तो उस तरीके के specializations बहुत ज़्यादा develop होने लग जाती हैं in the latter stages because that's what the organization needs. So those are some key distinctions between how early stages होते हैं ये होते हैं. By the way, like all of this is in retrospective. If I were to say, did we really think like this from the first day? No, it doesn't happen like that. Things happen a lot more organically, but you keep reflecting from time to time, like how are we operating and should we change our operating styles?
So how do you decide when you're standardizing? There might be multiple options. If, for example, if I'm building some code, I might have an option to go with Golang or Python or any other language, and some technology might become obsolete after a certain time. So as a tech person or a tech lead, how do you decide that this is what I need to pick? It's like according to the business needs or like what is trending right now, what looks more futuristic. I mean, how do we decide that so that we don't have to rework on it again?
It's a very valid point, by the way. Usually, like when we are trying to decide the tech stack, right, and we had different choices at different phases of the company's evolution. In the early stages, we tried to choose a stack which was of course popular. Like popularity is paramount because if you pick a very niche tech stack now, when you talk about a niche tech stack, it could be something which is really promising, but there's not enough traction in the ecosystem. The problem which happens with such tech stacks early on is when you get into problems with the stack, आपको enough community support नहीं मिलता है, and then that starts blocking you. So early on, you want to choose a stack which is popular, there is enough community support, and which is easy to use. And that's what you typically index on. As kind of like, and of course you think about scalability, which is can this tech stack actually absorb scale on a 5-year horizon? And usually 5 साल के beyond देखना मुश्किल होता है, but you want to keep that lens in mind कि hey, this tech stack better not be something which cannot support my company in beyond say 2 years, because what happens then is you have to redo a lot of it, and redoing is very expensive.
Right, it's super expensive, migration and all.
It's very expensive, and it doesn't mean that you can avoid migrating ever. Like हमारे company में भी हर organization में होता ही है कि you need to migrate tech stacks. What we consciously did over the years of evolution is like we chose like 1 or 2 tech stack pivots, and one such example is where Porter started off with the whole Ruby language as the pivot, and then kind of like built a lot of things around it. Very easy to build, fairly scalable. But the problem which you start hitting with that is Ruby is inherently dynamically typed. So what happens is when you have a more complex business landscape, lot of products, lot of businesses, आपको ना आपके काफ़ी indirections आने लग जाते हैं. It's you actually have multiple layers of concepts which need to be represented in the code, and for a developer to be able to actually rationalize that code, write it, and have good compile time guarantees becomes difficult. So you start relying on statically typed languages. Statically typed languages में फ़ायदा ये होता है कि you feel more confident about your code and you're able to reason about your code at the time of development itself. And that's when kind of like we consciously pivoted into Kotlin, and backed by the Java ecosystem. So the whole Kotlin and Java ecosystem is what we tapped into. Statically typed, again, the same core tenets of enterprise grade, very good community support. So we built our stack around it, and we consciously moved a lot of things there. And you need to make that choice at one point. Okay, is this really enterprise grade or not? Enterprise grade is not just a function of कि कितना traffic absorb कर सकता है, but also about the fact कि can it support a 100-member dev team? And in उन cases में can it support a lot of indirections? Can it give you a lot of compile time assurances that your code is right? You don't want your code to be checked.
Sorry to cut you. Could you please define the term indirection? I mean,
it's a valid point. So when I talk about indirection, right? Let me put it this way. When you're writing a lot of software, आपके company में काफ़ी concepts होंगे. So there is a notion of a driver partner, there is a notion of a booking, there is a notion of something else. Now, when you have, and this is what I call as indirection, these are abstractions which you create in your code base. And when you pick a dynamically typed language, you are not able to put a lot of compile time guarantees around them because it doesn't check them. Like it's a runtime language, right? Dynamically typed languages. So आप जब code करते हो, you need to rely on a lot of runtime tests to verify कि hey, the booking is working as expected and so on and so forth. And हाँ कि booking में actually ये attributes हैं. A booking actually has a notion of कि यार customer है, partner है, etc. etc. What a statically typed language does is कि it enforces that kind of correctness in compile time. So something like a Kotlin or a Java will tell you कि hey, in booking, I will not allow you to compile your code unless it meets those criteria कि यार ये 10 attributes होने चाहिए. And when that happens, it makes a lot easier for different people in the organization to start contributing to it. It's very easy in a large ecosystem जहाँ पे सब लोगों को idea नहीं कि booking में क्या होता है, ये क्या होता है, to miss things. And those errors will often manifest in runtime, and you need to rely on very, very strong test suites. While a statically typed language like a Java will make sure कि यार वो जो business correctness है ना, वो आपके compile time में ही ingrained है. So that's one example why we took this decision.
So the way I see it, there are less production run environment surprises when you're using a static language versus a dynamic language, right? I mean, most of the things are handled at development time.
True.
Alright, great. So a lot of people would like to join a company like Porter. So for them, I just want to understand the hiring process. What is the hiring process like? How do you hire? What are the qualities you look in the people when you're hiring them?
Our hiring process is not unlike other companies. It's a fairly standard process. We look at different channels of requests. Now there could be inbound requests, which is people who actually can apply on the company hiring portal saying that they're interested, and we process those requests. We have, of course, an internal referral channel as well. And then we have outbound channels as well. Outbound channels is where we look for candidates, and we have an in-house talent acquisition team which kind of like looks out for candidates, and we work with certain agencies as well. So that's usually how the whole setup works. If you look at kind of like the hiring criteria, right, it's of course like different for different demographies. Like अगर आप engineers की बात करो, who are your IC population, you test the knowledge fundamentals, like that becomes important. What we have been a little conscious about in terms of our hiring philosophy is not obsess too much about tech stack, which is we don't necessarily look for tech stack expertise. Say like today Porter has a big presence or usage of the whole Kotlin tech stack. We don't look for Kotlin developers and kind of like the whole Kotlin ecosystem. Rather, we treat it as more fungible and learnable. This is something which has stuck with us from day one, that hire people who just have strong programming fundamentals or say operating system fundamentals or networking fundamentals or data fundamentals. If the fundamentals are good, like they can actually like learn a new tech stack altogether, that's completely fine because it's more or less the same set of concepts. So that's kind of like helped us hire at a reasonably healthy clip. अगर हम वो नहीं करते तो then it would have narrowed down our search a lot. And I feel that this kind of a philosophy also helps engineers evolve very well and kind of like learn new stacks really well. Like you could have somebody who is a hardcore Ruby developer come in and learn Java, and that's good. You need to have that exposure to work with different grades of languages. Similarly, there could be somebody who has worked predominantly on NoSQL databases, but you come in and work on SQL databases, and that's good because you need that kind of exposure. So from an engineer persona specific point also, it's good because you get to try out a lot of stacks, and we don't kind of like curtail people ki like ek hi domain se hi aao. So that's been kind of like a conscious choice, helped us grow the team. What we do very consciously though is that as kind of like the company has scaled, you need to groom certain in-house experts. You also hire certain experts from outside, because जब आपकी tech stack, not tech stack, like I would say कि in the pursuit of improving the engineering maturity, you need to cultivate deep expertise. Now, deep expertise could be somebody who's really good at, say, something like a PostgreSQL. Now that is important to groom in-house, and then we do kind of like cultivate people who become domain experts in them. But the general philosophy is go try out a bunch of domains, and you should be okay. Don't tie people to one kind of like language. Hire people from other backgrounds as well. And over time, like you have this set of people where you have strong experts, and you have a set of people who actually like work on a diverse set of products. And
I have a question around this. So you said you focus a lot more on fundamentals. So if I am a fresher student, then I should be very, very strong at fundamentals. My language specific things would not be looked that much. But what if I'm an experienced person and you have a vacancy, say around Kotlin and Java development. So if I am coming, I think you already answered, but I just want to clarify. If I'm coming from a different domain, would you still hire me, or you would prefer the candidates who are actually already worked in a similar domain?
Both of them, like, okay, let me put it this way, ki, if we are really looking for like a core expertise in a particular language, then that does give the person a certain edge. For instance, in some of our platform teams, we do look for people who understand the ins and outs of JVM and Java, how it works, because they then start evolving like how our Java stack should look like, and वहाँ पे ये लोग काफ़ी relevant हो जाते हैं. But if you look at a lot of the other application teams, वहाँ पे ये criteria नहीं होता है. In which case, then the fundamentals become more important. The expertise doesn't necessarily give you an edge, so it becomes a more level playing ground.
Okay, Shruti, so I have one interesting question for you. Now you've reached this position. Do you still write code yourself, and also do you review your codes yourself?
Yeah. I often get asked this question, and at this stage, like the whole kind of like, I remember I used to actually like code and develop until a couple of years back, and right now it's kind of like hit a scale or a stage where a lot of my time actually goes into higher order review. So coding, unfortunately, is something which I don't do very actively. A lot of time goes into conscious review though. Now these reviews could be architectural reviews. It could be the occasional kind of like important piece of code or machinery which is going in, and वहाँ पे आप code review करते हो. But active coding is something which is just hard to find time for. And whenever such opportunities present themselves, it's usually in the form of, say, a pet project which you're doing, and something which you can take a little more time on, and then once kind of like you feel good about it, that's when you push it. But it's something which at this scale it's just hard to find time for.
Do you miss coding?
Not so much. Like it's something which I've accepted, and then I think like I enjoy the current set of responsibilities which are there. It's important to be close to the ground though. Like like often जब लोग बोलते हैं ना कि कोड करना क्यों ज़रूरी है, the reason why it's important is that you stay very close to how the engineering landscape is evolving, क्या easy है, क्या मुश्किल है, where could developers be struggling, what's the next big thing which could be done, and then that appreciation is only built when you're close enough. Now close enough का एक proxy है कि आप code करो. When you keep developing, you always you're finely tuned to कि how is the engineering landscape evolving, but there are other proxy mechanisms to do that, and I dial in on those proxy mechanisms. The proxy mechanisms could be that you are actively interested in what are the design choices which people are making, what are the stack choices people are making. You get into conversations about them, and you participate in a lot of review sessions and so on and so forth. You talk to a lot of engineers, and that's very important to do as well. So consciously, like I try to carve out time to talk to developers, managers, trying to figure out, like what are they struggling with, and यहीं पे काफ़ी सारा information निकलता है कि hey, like this aspect of engineering is really difficult at Porter. How do we solve it? Now an example of it could be the fact that like something like a staging testing has these problems, like how do we get to solving that? So then you realize that hey, maybe we should be investing into more automation there, or the fact that infrastructure procurement is such a is time taking and cumbersome. Now what do I do about it? Like can I empower the teams around it? So it's important to kind of like have that finger on the pulse and of the team, and the finger on the pulse can happen through these second order mechanisms. Now, second order mechanisms could be talking to engineers. Second order mechanisms could be in terms of doing those design reviews, asking questions. So if you're close enough to that, it serves the purpose reasonably well, and it frees up enough time so that you're able to do the core aspect of your job, which is administration.
And if you are at this position, what is your day-to-day routine like? I mean, you do a lot of, as you said, you talk to engineering team a lot. So is it like more into talking to the management more, talking to the tech team more, or like how is it like, and getting more involved into the technology and more into the management? What side do you look at more?
It's a blend of activities, but broadly I would describe how I would describe my usual kind of like bandwidth is there's a big section of time which goes into quote unquote problem framing, and that's a key distinction. Like when as an engineer you're a lot into problem solutioning, but जब आप actually teams and orgs cooperate करते हो, you spend a disproportionate amount of your time framing a particular problem. Now, a problem framing could be कि what kind of goals should the team be chasing. Now, these goals could be business specific goals. कि okay, what's the next product market fit for the trucks business for Porter? Or it could be a very tech specific thing. A tech specific thing could be that how do we improve, say, our product analytics posture in the organization, and what do we need there. So those kinds of problem statements, like how do you frame them so that and cascade the right goals. So planning में काफ़ी time जाता है. And what this means is you talk to individual teams and businesses, figure out कि यार what are their kind of like annual goals, 6-month goals. Then there is also the aspect of operational strategy as part of this. If business strategy नहीं होता, operational strategy is कि यार मैं operations कैसे improve करूँ. And operation maturity could be that how do I actually cut my developer cycle times by say 20-30%, which means that you're actually releasing 20-30% faster than normal, which allows you to actually get that much faster feedback from the market. So उसको कैसे solve करोगे? Maybe in the name of that you need to invest a lot more into automation. It could be infrastructure automation, it could be testing automation and so on and so forth. So that's what you double down on. So it's generally a blend of planning around business strategy and operational strategy. Then there are, of course, like reviews. A lot of my time goes into running a good ship. And running a good ship often means that how do you know that businesses and teams are staying on course. Now, staying on course could be that उनके goals कैसे काम कर रहे हैं, like where are things going out of track and how do you course correct them, so you do very diligent reviews of them. Or it could be that SLAs which are promising, both internally and externally. And an SLA could be that in your entire booking conversion, normally you see that there is X%, but suddenly वो आधा हो गया. Now that's something which is broken, then you immediately try to fix it. So how do you make sure that सारे businesses and teams के right SLOs and SLAs committed हैं, and you are kind of like respecting them. So operational reviews में काफ़ी time जाता है. Then there is of course the whole people aspect of it. Now the people aspect in a larger scale organization is there is upward management, which is with the founders. Then there is lateral management with fellow leaders. There is downward management, which is with the managers and the engineers. A lot of it is relationship building. You consciously spend a lot of time around it. That's something which you learn that as you kind of like become part of a larger and larger team, and as you start running larger teams, the people equation starts becoming really important. So networking, relationship building takes a fair amount of time. Pulse gathering takes a lot of time. Like feedbacks could be data driven, it could be qualitative. You need to talk to people. You need to also spend a lot of time bringing in outside in perspective. Outside in perspective is talk to industry peers and kind of like your fellow counterparts in other companies. And that's when you get to know ki, okay, this is how you're looking at the same problem. The perspectives challenge hote hain, and that's very important to do as well. So the whole kind of like internal networking and external networking also becomes very important. So that's usually a blend of activities which I find myself doing.
So there are a lot of things that go around when you're working day to day, right? I mean,
that's true.
Right. Now I have an interesting question, which is like when something breaks in the company, कुछ फट जाता है, तो how do you deal with that? I mean, you still go to the system and check out what went wrong, what are the logs like, and which code is doing it, which line is doing it, or like you are okay. I mean, now there is a team to manage it.
It depends. It depends on the severity of the incident. By the way, like any downtime, like is generally a very stressful environment for the entire org, and I feel for the engineers themselves, क्योंकि engineer की जान kind of like हाथ में रहता है, and which is that okay, your global outages are probably the most stressful, like because when a global outage happens, it means that you're not getting in orders. The business is suffering because you're not getting revenue, but you need to also think about the users themselves. Like your partners are worried that they're not getting orders, so their daily income has gone down. Customers are frustrated that उनका order भेज नहीं रहा है. So in these environments, when there are global outages, it becomes a more collective exercise. So it goes all the way to me. I'm usually part of that war room along with other leaders and the engineers. We sit together. My role is often to be a good orchestrator in these exercises, क्योंकि इस situation में tension and worry इतना रहता है कि it's very easy for people to become tunnel vision. It's very easy for people to panic, and you need to bring in a sense of method in that madness, and that method in the madness is where you are kind of like segregating responsibilities. Ki, hey, like you look at these aspects of the system. It could be logs, it could be maybe something in the infrastructure, it could be something in the application, and you want to make sure that the right set of people are looking at the right kind of things. So वो orchestration थोड़ा important हो जाता है, and that's where people like me come in. And of course, like the developers go into their own systems and make sure that like they investigate and diagnose the problem well.
Those are the toughest things as a tech person, right? I mean, I remember मैं जॉब करता था कंपनी में, वहाँ पे हमेशा हम लोगों को डर लगा था कि रात में कॉल ना आ जाए यार, कुछ फट ना जाए, एंड रात में गाड़ी जाती थी और जाके काम करना होता था वहाँ पे, तो that was something.
Completely understand that, yes.
So I think we are going to end this session now. I just want to have your final message for the budding entrepreneurs or the people who want to become a tech lead like you, a person who is like chief product and technology officer, or a person who is a CTO. What are the things that made you what you are, and what are the things that a person, a fresher or an experienced person with say 3-4 years or 2 years of experience want to become like you? What are the things, or what is the roadmap that person should follow?
A few things which come to my head, like, and this is from more from personal experience. I feel that like when you want to become a tech leader, in fact, like this, मेरा ये learning is true irrespective of whether it's an early stage company or a late stage company, is that you have to be very tied to the business. People sometimes can feel that engineering is a separate discipline, but when you don't harmonize it with the business itself, and when I say harmonize it with the business, you have to have a very vested interest in ki, how is the product working, what is the business all about, understanding of the user personas, किन markets पे काम करता है, that kind of deep attachment to the business problem and the product problem statement is extremely critical, because that shapes the kind of choices you make, and it often makes or breaks the trajectory of the company. If you're not doing that well, you might be making a kind of like a good sophisticated engineering choice, but it's not really helping the company. So I think like being very business focused and user focused is an essential trait which defines your success as an engineering leader. Apart from that though, I feel a few things which I have consciously kept in mind is, in the entire engineering leadership trajectory, like you should be curious about different disciplines of engineering, and there has to be a very open mind to, you know, like how different kind of like gears work together in the engineering ecosystem. Now it could be, by the way, like I started off with a data science background, got into core backend engineering, got exposed to front-end aspects, got exposed to infrastructure aspects, and I think like that curiosity is really important to expose yourself to different disciplines, because that's when you start seeing the bigger picture of how these pieces are fitting together. So do that, expose yourself to that, and also expose yourself to sister or like kind of like supporting functions around engineering. You have to be naturally curious and interested in how HR helps you, and in how kind of like it helps build the right set of people inside the team, the right practices inside the team. You have to be interested in the financial aspect of things. Like at the end of the day, धंधा चला रहे हो, धंधा चलाना है तो you have to be financially prudent. So you have to, you know, like build that muscle also. Okay, how do I be cost efficient, and then how do I kind of like cut costs somewhere, make costs somewhere, etc., etc. So I think like that kind of a general expose yourself as much as possible mindset is really important, and yearn for opportunities like that. If need be, fight for opportunities like that so that you get exposed to that. I have been lucky that I have gotten a lot of those opportunities organically. मुझे इतना fight नहीं मारना पड़ा. But I think like that sense of consciously looking out for such opportunities becomes really crucial. So that becomes important. And then thirdly, don't under-index on the people aspect. Maybe in a very early stage, आप 10-20 लोगों की team को चला रहे हो. Even there it becomes important though, but maybe the weightage is a little lesser. But as kind of like your teams grow, you need to understand what motivates people. You need to get into aspects of how to kind of like form the right tribes. Your org design becomes really important. You need to think about career architecture. So you know, like people equation and how to effectively work as a team, work through people, वो बहुत important हो जाता है. So do that. And one final thing is outside in perspective. Just challenge yourself a lot. Like when you sit in a silo inside a company, it's very easy for you to be tunnel visioned. आपको पता नहीं होता है कि what's the new benchmark which you should be chasing for. And when you get that outside in perspective of like what's the industry doing, what are other people doing, what's kind of like the latest and greatest, how are people pushing the frontiers of a particular problem, that then changes your benchmark in your head, and then you challenge your team as well. So outside in perspective is also something which is really crucial here. But these are some learnings from what I have seen in the last 10 odd years.
So audience, I think you've got the roadmap. You should not be only a tech person. You need to understand the business. You need to understand the people perspective. You need to challenge yourself, and you need to understand the dhanda and business, right, to reach the higher level. Anything else, I mean, for some final words that you would like to end, Shruti, to this, whatever I've summarized to?
No, like I think I'm generally not such an outspoken person, but I would limit it to these kind of like key messages. The key idea for a good successful organization is to really invest yourself into the core idea, the core vision, and then think about how your knowledge skill set actually contributes to that. It has to be a harmony between what the business brings in for you and how your knowledge and expertise kind of like contributes to that. So find the right balance, and then you should be good.
Thanks, Shruti. I mean, it was great talking to you. I was myself very curious because I also wanted to understand how you're running things here, the tech team here. I personally asked a lot of questions which I had in my mind, and you answered them really well. It must help a lot of people. So guys, it was great talking to Shruti here, and you must have learned a lot out of this episode. So please do like and share this video and subscribe to the channel.